All right, I'm good.
Awesome. All right, so welcome everyone. This is the Akron Software Craftsmanship Meetup. I appreciate your attendance tonight. My name is Mark Harwood. I'm the host of the event. Um, we meet every month, and we do have presentations planned until July of this year. I'm probably going to be able to get us through the rest of the year with a presentation once a month. It's on the third Thursday of every month. We're an agnostic group interested in software. So yeah, no real super hardcore focus on anything outside of just software development and doing it well. Uh, so yeah, what else do I want to say in the intro? Um, I work at Robert Half Technology, which is kind of the sponsor of the group. I should mention them. We are a really big staffing firm, so we help people get jobs, and we also help companies find new people. I specifically manage a team of software engineers who are full-time employees of Robert Half, and either solo or in small groups, we consult with companies in the Midwest and help them build custom business apps and data warehouses and stuff like that. So if any of that is interesting to you, or you want to talk about any of those topics anymore, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And then I will be dropping some invites to Slack channels, community Slack channels here, which brings me to my next point. I'm really into collaboration and networking, especially in Northeast Ohio and in the tech community. Um, there is a public Cleveland tech Slack and a public Canton tech Slack. Really great communities, very nice, friendly people. They often collaborate with one another or just talk about tech stuff that they are doing in dev. So I will be posting links to join those if anyone is interested in joining either of those Slack channels. So um, I am pretty sure that's everything. Oh, I do want to give a big shout out, even though we're not there right now. Under normal circumstances, we meet at Akron's Bounce Innovation Hub, um, which is a public co-working space. They're really great people. The space is really awesome, and we do plan on returning there in the summer to meet in person. So yeah, check them out, especially if you're in the market for like a co-working area or just somewhere to go that's not your house while working remotely. Bounce Innovation Hub, they're great. Okay, so that is all my stuff. I'm going to be handing it off to Ben Rinehart now. Ben and I have known each other for 3 or 4 years. I'm not even quite sure anymore, but he's a really cool dude, and I will solicit him once a year to do a presentation here, and he is kind enough to agree to do it. He works at Nexsys Technologies, which is part of the Rock family of companies. So Ben, if you could, next time when you're talking to Dan Gilbert, let him know that I appreciate him personally allowing you to do this. That would mean a lot to me. And yeah, we're going to talk about and learn about micro front ends with Webpack. So Ben, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I don't know that you think I'm all that cool after you hear this talk, but like Mark said, I'm Ben Rinehart, software engineer now over at Nexsys Technologies. Just made a little switch over there with my buddy Vince, who's on the call right now. And loving it so far. Primarily, I do Angular and C# development, so I'll just give you a heads up ahead of time. That's kind of going to be my bread and butter, Angular in particular in this particular case. Let me go ahead and start sharing my screen. There's not a whole lot to me. I'm boring. I have 4 kids. I spend a lot of time in my house because I work from home. I love it. It's great, except for when it's not great, as you all know. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's go ahead and start the slides. Slides have been kind of short today just because it's, we're doing our thing here. Give me 1 second here to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see the micro front ends of Webpack 5 module federations?
Yep.
logo?
And actually, real quick, if anyone has questions, feel free to unmute and politely interrupt Ben. Or if
Yeah,
you would prefer me to politely interrupt Ben, you can drop them in the chat, and I will find a good time to ask your question for you.
awesome. Very good. Thanks, Mark. All right, so this is a little bit about me. I talked a little bit about that. I've been doing website design since 2013. I got into this kind of accidentally. I was in the transportation industry, in 2013, when I found myself without a job, I said, I want to do something different, and I started building a website to sell printer ink. And I said, hey, I made a pretty nice website, but I really don't want to sell printer ink because that sucks. So I decided to just kind of branch out and start doing design stuff. And so I started working with WordPress, taught myself everything I could about it. I have a degree, just a bachelor's in liberal arts, the I don't know what I'm going to do with my life degree from Malone. So I kind of was like, all right, let's see what I can do. And I love it. I just absolutely just ate up everything I could, CSS wise, HTML wise. And then in 2017, I came across a friend who had gone to the Software Guild, which used to be in the Balance Innovation Hub, before it was the Balance Innovation Hub. That kind of led me on my journey to being a software developer. So I did the 3-month course there, and it was great in C#. And then I got a job working with AVI Food Systems out here in Warren. So I actually live in Trumbull County now, but I grew up in Greene. So I'm very familiar with the Akron area for all y'all who are Akron Knights, and Rubber City all the way. So yeah, if you want to see a little bit more about me, feel free to check out my personal site. It's right on here. And I'll send Mark the slides for this so you guys can take a look at that on the Meetup page after the fact here. I also have a GitHub page. So if you wanted to check out some of the projects I've worked on, including this one, we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. This is going to be a live coding example kind of situation today. So feel free to code along if you have a second screen or a separate laptop. We're going to have some fun today with Webpack Module Federation. So that's enough about me. Like I said, I'm pretty boring. So let's talk about something that's pretty cool. It looks like Mark just dropped the link for the GitHub in the Slack. If you want to get started, you can just do a git clone. You will need to get the Angular CLI installed if you don't already have that installed. So let's go ahead and start with Webpack. So there might be some people on this call that don't know what Webpack is. So I just wanted to kind of start with that and kind of walk through a little bit about like what Webpack is and why it's so awesome and what Module Federation is. And the other word that's in here is microservices. So I'm going to go a little bit into that before we jump into the actual coding example. So what is Webpack? Webpack is an open source module bundler. It is literally everywhere on the web. The Angular CLI uses it to build Angular applications. I believe the Create React app uses it. For sure, the Vue CLI is using it under the covers. It's used pretty much as a bundler. So what it does is it takes your HTML, JavaScript, CSS, SCSS, less, stylus, whatever stuff you're talking about. It pre-compiles it, pre-processes it, bundles it into a big bundle, and then shoves it down to the client so that they can have a nice, pretty little JavaScript file that doesn't have 80 or 60 to 80 different JavaScript files in your DOM. It just makes the developer's life easy, and it really helps out developers. So that's pretty much what Webpack does. It's kind of extended since then to be a lot of things. But those are its primary goals. Like I said, TypeScript transpilation and compilation happens through that. Pre-processing I know like the Angular CLI actually does pre-processing through JavaScript and not through Ruby, like the standard SAS preprocessor was. So it's very heavily used. So before I jump into what Module Federation is, because that kind of is very much connected to Webpack, I want to get into why Module Federation is necessary and what are the things that Webpack can do to kind of solve this problem that I'm going to tell you about here. So what is a micro front end? So let's jump back here into like architecture. People who have been doing development for a while can, And anyone who's been working with apps that have kind of been around for a while can tell you a little bit about the old school way of doing development, which kind of is a legacy of software applications on your computer. So back in the day, before the internet was a thing, we would have to, in order to get a computer program to run on your computer, you would get sent a floppy disk, a CD, what have you. You would insert it into your computer. It would install. You put it in there. They have to send you regular updates on, like on a time basis. There really wasn't an internet to do that, and so things tend to be these large monolithic applications that did everything. They made your bread. They buttered your toast. They called your grandma and they gave her soup, all in the same application. So what we realized when the web became a thing and kind of started maturing is that this monolithic architecture doesn't always work for the web. It can, if anyone who's looked at old code that's kind of has a lot of cruft on it, can tell, and has had a lot of hands in the fire, can tell you that it's really hard to read sometimes, because as these projects grow and grow and grow, you have 50, 80, 100, 200, 500 projects in one application, it gets really hard to figure out where the heck you're at and what you actually need to change. Along with that comes some major problems with like dependencies. So say you have tons and tons of dependencies in one large application. This becomes hard to manage because you may have .NET 5, but you can't move to .NET 6 because you have like 16 dependencies that are out of date. I'm just using kind of modern examples. But you have like 16 or 17 dependencies that aren't up to date to .NET 6. And so you may sit on that old version of .NET for a really long time, sometimes past when it's got support. And so that puts you in a really bad position because you could be missing out on some security vulnerability patches, things like that. So a bunch of smart people kind of got into a bunch of different rooms and internet chat rooms and Discords and stuff, and kind of came up with a way to get around this. So what they came up with was microservice architecture. So microservice architecture isn't the purpose of my talk today, so I'm just going to gloss over it here a little bit, but it's essentially taking all of those pieces and following domain-driven design practices, breaking them up into small chunks of what they're supposed to do. So whereas you may have a monolith that, butters the bread and calls grandma all in the same application before, now you have a call grandma service, a butter your bread service, a toast making service, and whatever else your services are. They all are connected, but they're all independent applications sitting inside of things like Docker containers managed through Kubernetes or what have you. Those are kind of popular services, but basically they let you have the freedom to kind of build things in a microcosm, in a small little a small microservice that lets you be able to kind of stick to the domain while also being able to update your dependencies, because you have a lot less of them, and being able to stop. You can have, like, if you're a large company like I work for, you could have many teams and they could all have their own microservice that they work on. So microservices have been really important and they've been really helpful for a long time, but we've had a problem on the front end for a long time now. And that is that we still kind of have a monolith mindset on the front end. So SPAs took off, which stands for single page applications, and became very popular. So anyone who is here probably has heard of Angular, React, Vue, even vanilla JavaScript, lots of other things like that. Sorry, my kids are stomping right up on me here, sorry. These single page applications allow you to have some really awesome tech functionality. You don't have any page refreshes. You have lots of interactivity that comes along with that. And it's really important. So one of the pieces that we've been missing in the enterprise level for a long time is this concept of, like, what do we do to kind of mimic this microservice architecture on the front end? Can I have a team that works on, for instance, Zulily? Zulily's got a website. They have a team that may work on the listing page. They have a team that might work on the checkout page. They have a team that works on the billing transit, the transportation, all these different things are different domains that are all handled there. And one of the things that we can do with the thing I'm about to talk about is we can actually have those as separate applications that interact with one another, that pull code from one another, and can actually like act as one single application, even though they're running on different ports, even though they may be running on different servers in different clouds even. So that's what module federation gives us, which is the next slide. So what is module federation? It's what I just said there. It's a Webpack 5 feature. Webpack 5 is production ready. It's stable. It's ready to use today. Angular, if you're using Angular 11 gives us opt-in access to it. So it's not quite ready for production, but Angular 12 is coming right down the pike. I'm actually using Angular 12, like alpha, I think it's beta like 5 or something, release candidate 5 in the code that you can code along with here. And that allows you to do that as an opt-in feature. So there's a little bit of coding along the way that we're going to go into here about how to do this. But today I'm going to walk you through how to implement this module federation, this new technology that allows a JavaScript application to dynamically share that code from one application to another. You can share code from little components you make, whole modules in Angular or React or Vue, all the way up to the actual framework itself. You can share the Angular common file. You can share the React file, the React DOM file, React router. You can share those things between applications so that it gets loaded once by one shell application. And then whenever you load the other independent applications, they pick up the code, not from their application. They pick it up from Webpack in a module in what's called a remote entry. So this is something we're going to walk about through today. It was invented by an awesome guy named Zach Johnson, really smart dude. I totally recommend checking out everything that he has written. At the end of these slides, I put a list of different things you can read up on, and his original post on Medium is on there. Definitely worth a read. So without any further ado, let's jump into the coding. So let me leave this up on the screen for just a few minutes. I put a little QR code there if you want to just scan it and go there, or just you can click on that GitHub and clone it there. Mark already put that in the chat. And so if you want to, I'll leave the chat is open, so you can go and click it and access it there. And I'm going to switch over to VS Code here. So while I'm doing that, does anyone have any questions at all about any of this, the kind of the high level concepts?
Yep, I have a newbie question, and if you could try to keep the explanation newbie friendly, that'd be.
I will try.
Okay, how like what is powering like the ability for different projects to reference each other, even if they're like, in completely different places? Sorry, everyone, I do not write code. I'm not sure if that question told you or not.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So Webpack, the whole purpose of Webpack is kind of like take all those JavaScript files that you have, the HTML files, the CSS, and package them up into a nice little bundle and send it to the server. So what you're essentially doing is each one of these apps has its own bundle. So you have something running on port, like we'll see here, 4200, another one running on port 7000, and one on port 8000. And the 4200 is designated as shell. And so the Webpack CLI is the thing that's actually doing this behind the scenes. Webpack is kind of watching, it's bundling it up in such a way that it knows when it creates the bundle that it needs to be able to watch this location and that location for any changes. So like, for instance, like what I'm going to show you here is we have an Angular application that when you go to a certain route, it goes and it calls that external bundle from a different server, a different port, and pulls it in as its own standalone like package of JavaScript. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Any other ones? All right. Well, let's get started then. So can everyone see? Well, no. Got to reshare it. I moved it to a different screen so I can see it. All right. Can you all see the VS Code here?
No, we cannot.
Okay.
It's just a black screen.
Let me try just sharing the actual screen then. Let's do desktop 1. Okay. Can you see the screen now?
Still no for some reason.
Let's see. Let's share and resume, see if that fixes it.
This is what we get for testing it earlier.
Yeah, I know, right? I swear there's something on the screen, y'all. I promise you.
Is it
There
just
really
me?
is.
Can anyone else see it?
I cannot.
No.
It says that he's trying. It says that he's sharing something, but it's just like a completely blank arc.
Okay.
Do you have any other like Hangouts or
Oh, yeah.
Google Open?
No, I do not. No, just the one I was sharing earlier. I think the fact that I was sharing it earlier and then went back out and then back in caused it to freak out.
Do you need to rejoin the?
Yeah, I'm
Zoom?
gonna drop and rejoin and see if that'll
Okay.
fix it. Give me one
That'll
second, guys. I'm sorry about this.
No worries. No biggie.
Oh, he's not here. I can't believe this guy.
The audacity of this man.
Kind of wonder he's not been around long enough to really see a legacy application.
There we go. All right, I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thank you, thank you. It's a long trip. My wife told me not to be funny, so I apologize for being funny.
All
right.
About you while you're gone. Have you ever have you experienced a legacy application that is huge and complicated?
Yes, I have, unfortunately.
All right, so now we see the Final Fantasy IX view
Good.
characters.
Good. All right. Can you see? Can you see VS Code now?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. All right. So this is what we're going to be building today. I'm a nerd. I'm a huge nerd. I like Final Fantasy. I grew up on this stuff. And the grouping of games that I particularly love is the Final Fantasy PS PlayStation games. So 7, 8, and 9, Tactics, all that stuff. I apologize already, Mark, because you're not going to see your favorite one on here, and we're not going to be doing anything about it.
I actually love Tactics too. So.
You love Tactics, yeah. You're not going to see that one either. Tactics or 9.
Okay.
I sincerely apologize for the slight. But basically, what we have here is this application. So you'll notice it's running on port 4200, and when I click on Final Fantasy 7. Still running on 4200, still got a route for 7. And you can see we can go in here and learn a little bit about Aerith. And we've got this stuff I've hard coded pretty much in the app just for fun. You can go back and forth. You can check out a little bit about RedX. It's real simple stuff. If I go to Final Fantasy VIII, similar design, but you got this up here, Final Fantasy VIII, and you got these characters, a little bit different color scheme. And I did that to kind of make you realize that these are actually separate applications running on separate ports. So this is the Final Fantasy VII application. It's running on port 7000. And it is, ignore the second duplicate. I have no idea why this is happening. It's kind of weird, but I think it's probably because the router is kind of thinking it needs to go there twice. But you can do the exact same stuff on here. All the code is actually being shared over to this. So this is not like running inside of an iframe or anything. It's actually sharing code over the wire from port 7000 to the shell and port 4200 dynamically. Same thing with 8. You can learn a little bit about Rinoa. And you can see that she's, got her a blaster edge as her weapon, and Skylar Davenport did her English voice. So how do we do this? Let me show you a little bit about what's going on behind under the hood. So let me share, do a call here. I'll show you the network tab. So I am now in Chrome DevTools, and I'm going to be taking a look at the JavaScript files. So you'll notice this typical Angular stuff loaded.
Sorry,
You
Ben.
got your polyfill. Yeah.
We don't see the, if you're showing the tools, we're not.
Oh, you don't?
seeing
Okay.
that. We're only seeing the Final Fantasy website.
Oh, you are? Okay. That's weird. Okay. Well, I assure you, I'll just tell you what's going on. If I dock it, can you see? Let's see if you can see it if I dock it.
Sure, the sharing's not paused. Sometimes that happens in Zoom when you
it
go
looks
from
like
full
I am.
screen.
It's still green.
Sometimes full screen makes it wonky.
Oh, does it? Okay. Can you guys see it now? It should be at the bottom of the screen. No.
No, try
That's all right.
clicking off sharing and then share again
Oh boy.
on VS
Here we go.
Code.
All right. I will try. Hopefully this works.
This is odd. I've never had Zoom do this to me before.
How about this? Let me know when you see it.
It's the just telling us you've started screen sharing,
Back
but
to
we're not able to see it.
Our old friend, the black screen.
Hello, black screen. Still black?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna drop and drop back in again. But anyways, let me just tell you what's going on. So we have a polyfills file, a styles file, a main.js file, a bunch of other files that get loaded for Angular, but we do not see that actually loaded. And when I click on the 7 link, it actually loads a file called remote entry. So that remote entry JS file contains all of the code that we need to run the entire application for Final Fantasy VII, all loaded over the wire. And you can actually watch it happen as you do that. So let me go ahead and stop sharing. I'm going to hop out, come right back in, and we'll actually take a look at the code then.
I was curious, would it help in Zoom if somebody else shares their screen and then gives it back to them? Would that fix the problem?
I was actually just thinking about what kind of hacky solution I'd be able to work out if I shared my screen, but then I was connected to Ben on some other services call where he's sharing screen like Slack or something, or someone mentioned Google Hangouts earlier. I'd be totally willing to try that out. Yeah, this has legitimately never happened before in a year of hosting remote events. We've never had Zoom be buggy like this. So sorry, everyone.
Sorry about this, guys. All right. All right. Let me know when you can see my screen. I'm sharing code now.
Yep, it's there.
Cool. All right. So I'm sharing code. I'm going to just talk about the code for now because I don't want to switch over to try to switch applications here. So if we go into this module federation demo, this is actually the final step. So I'm going to show you everything put together. We have an application here for it called Shell, and I'll get into a little bit what these are in a second. We have the VII or 7 application folder and the VIII or 8 application folder. So these are all individual standalone Angular applications. And if we look down here in the console, we actually have 3 Angular CLI instances running. So on this side right here, I have the Shell application running. And on this side, we have 7. And then finally on the far right is 8. So those 3 applications are all running separately on their individual ports. So how do we do this? Let me go ahead and close this application. We can walk through this starting from the beginning. So I broke this down into chunks. If you wanted to do this on your own after the fact, I have a file in here, should be in the main folder called docs. And inside docs, you'll find 2 different tutorials. Right now, I just have Angular I apologize. I plan on having something for React and for vanilla JavaScript. But if you go to some of the links in the slide, you'll be able to find examples of all of those, including things even on the server like Next.js, Express, so on and so forth. So we have two files here. I have a doc for dynamic and a doc for non-dynamic. And they're just basically walkthroughs that you can download and take a look through on your own that kind of walk you through the steps of adding module federation to your Angular applications. So like I mentioned before, this is only available in Angular 11. So if you try to do this with the CLI for Angular 10, it will not work. And there is some setup that's currently required to get this working. So I'm going to walk you through each step, and then we can take it from there. So I'm going to go ahead and start by checking out the ng step 1. This is just the first step for everything. And you'll notice the only thing that's left is my no modules for 8, because we are not actually working with 8 from the beginning. I wanted to show you how we actually add that. So starting from the top here, the first thing we want to do in an Angular application is we have this three applications. So I said I'd tell you a little bit about what Shell does. So Shell is the application that is kind of the main driving application. It is the one that will be sharing the code. It is the one that is running. It's running those two applications inside of it, and it's pulling those as what's called remotes. So you have the host, which is the shell, and you have the remote. Those are two different important concepts. So the first thing we want to do when we want to add Angular module federation to share this code is we need to go into the package.json file, and right above dependencies, we have to start by adding this, for now at least, until Angular makes this a part of first. A really important part of the application of their CLI. This is what we have to do. We have to actually tell it to use Webpack 5 because it's an opt-in feature. So we're going to add this code right above dependencies. So we're adding resolutions, Webpack greater than anything that's greater than 5. So what this does is it tells the CLI, hey, I need to load this using Angular, but just like I normally would, but I'm going to build this using Webpack 5 instead of the default 4. This gives us access to module federation. So once we've done this, the next step we need to do is make sure that you're using Yarn. And the reason we want to use Yarn is because Yarn handles package dependencies in a different way than NPM does. And from what I understand, I believe the Angular team is actually working right now on changing over the default from NPM over to Yarn for this particular reason. So we just run this command. It's called ng. I'm just going to close these so you can kind of see everything. We run this ng config CLI.packageManager yarn. We're basically just telling the Angular CLI to use Yarn instead of NPM. So once that's run, we are now using Yarn. Every time we use ng, you'll notice it'll say now running with Yarn. The next thing we need to do is we need to add a package to our application, and this comes from an awesome dude named Manfred. I'm sure if you've looked into module federation, you'll come across Manfred's name. Manfred is a Google development expert at GDE, who was I believe he was very, very involved in the Angular Universal stuff, and I think also the web components. Don't hold me to that one. But he's really smart, and every time I listen to him, I'm like, wow, I just learned like a million things. It's like drinking through a fire hose. So Manfred has put together an application, a package called module federation. So you need to run ng add at Angular architects /module federation, module -federation. And then there's a couple different parameters you can pass in. So these will be asked of you when you're actually running this, but what ng add does is it adds the package, but it also does some scaffolding on the application. So we're going to pass in the project name. We're going to say this is just called shell, and this actually will rename your application to the name that you're passing in, and then port 4200, because we just want to keep the same port. If we wanted to set this to like 5,000 or 3,000, this would be a time to do that, and it will actually change the port to the one that we want to run it on. This is particularly helpful when we're doing the remotes, so 7 and then eventually 8. So I'm going to run this first, and we'll see what happens. So I've already got this package installed, and it's already done the stuff it needs to do. So you'll notice a couple different files were updated. Not only was it created this Webpack config file and the Webpack prod config file, and you may ask yourself, I've never seen a Webpack config file in an Angular application. Well, that's because the Angular CLI hides that from us. It does all the Webpack configuration under the covers in the command line, and so you don't ever see this happening because it's obscuring it. But what we are doing here is we're actually telling it to use a different builder. So it will go into, it's going to go into shell. Let's go take a look at shell. So this first file it created was a webpack config.js file, and it scaffolded this all out for us, including some stuff that we're going to comment out eventually, and I'll show you where that's at in a second here. But this is the Webpack config file. It basically is sitting on top of the regular Angular CLI Webpack config, and it's going to give us the access to that module federation plugin. So the way Webpack works is it has, say you want to use module federation, you use it as what's called a plugin. It's like just kind of think of it as like a WordPress plugin, right? If you ever use those, or some sort of plugin that basically just does a specific task. Module federation has one of those as well. So we have a couple things that we'll have to set up here. And I'm going to show you those in a minute here. In addition to that, it created a Webpack prod config. This is just basically exporting the Webpack config to help us to run it in CI. It's not really an important file for purposes of this demo, but it's there just so you're aware. In addition, it added a bootstrap.ts file. If it was not there, sometimes you have a bootstrap.ts file there. This one did not, and it added that. So it tells us to enable prod mode, and then it does this bootstrapping, which is important for the dynamic loading of the applications from the remote locations. So from the V.
Ben, we had a freeze again.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were going strong there.
Yeah. Is it caught up at all?
No, I was hoping that it would too. We're looking at the module federation plugin line.
Okay. Let me do the same song and dance here. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Again.
This is the new theme.
All right, and I'm back again. Share the whole thing this time. So tell me when you see the code.
We see it.
All right, sweet. So this is the Bootstrap file. Bootstrap is just basically dynamically loading the platform browser dynamic Bootstrap module. And then the last thing it does is it actually updates the Angular JSON file. I'm going to go ahead and save that, close this. Let's load this so we can see the files that were changed. It's kind of important. Just a minute, y'all.
Ooh, I think it just like froze
Oh,
instantaneously.
geez. Oh, wow. Still frozen?
Yeah.
Did I mention how much I really, really love Zoom? No, Vince,
Yeah,
it's not the new fancy Mac.
Yeah, this is so strange. My bad, man.
Okay. right, that's right. No worries. Okay, so let's try. I unshared. I'm gonna try share again. I'll go back to just sharing the code.
Is that a like Mac security feature or something?
I don't think so. I enabled everything for Mac.
Huh. Yeah, we have the Ben Rinehart has started sharing screen thing.
Let me try to share my screen. One share, and let me try to share, and then I'll hand it back to you.
Okay.
Just for fun.
Worth a shot.
Yeah, put a shot.
Could always just aim your webcam at your screen.
Yeah, I might end up having to do that, man. That's
Well,
terrible.
I was thinking about calling you on like Google or Slack or something,
Okay.
and then you share your screen, and then I'll share
Okay.
my screen. We
I could do that as well.
So
Let's see,
Matt,
Matt's
we have
sharing his
this.
screen.
Yeah, Matt, we have the same. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Matt, try to hand it back to Ben.
Yeah, I'm trying to. How do I get out of share?
I'm gonna request. Oh wait, I can't.
There you
Yeah.
go. Oh, yeah.
Cool. Okay. I'm screen sharing.
That
now.
worked. Musical
Cool.
screens worked.
Musical screens. That's what we'll try next time then. All right. All right. So it is catching up here from the stuff it was doing before. So I'm going to jump into the shell. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I got really silent there for a second. All right, so run this Angular add application. So it looks like we've already got the Webpack Config. It's already got there. If we go into the Angular JSON file, I made some changes in here. So it you notice that earlier change we made is now reflected CLI package manager yarn. But if we start scrolling down here a little bit, we're going to come across a couple things. We'll see this line, extra Webpack config. This is basically saying after the Webpack config is run, then run this, and we're running the Webpack config.js file, which I just showed you a few minutes ago. I think there's a couple other ones too, like this line right here. And if you do change the port, it will be changed in the serve. Additionally, it uses the NGX build plus builder, which is a third-party builder that allows us to build things outside of just the typical CLI. It sits on top of the CLI, so it still uses it, but it's a heavily used builder used by a lot of the community for a lot of different things. But in this case, it's being used for building modules for module federation. So we got our port all set. Everything's good to go. So what's the next thing we need to do? We need to let's take a look at the, oh, there's another thing too, a main file. So if you go into the source application folder and you go into main, it's added this line for import bootstrap.catch, and that actually goes to the bootstrap TS file. That's right here. So it's basically, it's loading bootstrap. Not bootstrap the CSS framework. It's actually like there's a bootstrap module, they call it, to bootstrap Angular together. Interact with the Webpack CLI. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a route to our shell for the new remote module like this. So I'm going to go in here and I go to my apps folder. I go to the routing module, and you'll notice we just have that home component. So if I were to run this right now, it would just show us our home component, which is just basically that list of Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII. So we need to add a route so that when someone clicks on 7, it actually dynamically loads 7 from the remote. So I'm going to show you the non-dynamic way of doing this first, and then we'll go into the dynamic way of doing it. This is going to be like you actually declare where everything is, and you tell it, I need it from here, I need it from this location, I need it from that location, and it's going to load into this URL. So I'm going to say the path. So basically, anytime I hit the path that has VII in it, or is VII, I'm going to then load children. So this is Angular's way of telling, this is our way of telling Angular just to lazy load this component, this module. But instead of just a regular lazy loaded module that Angular knows about, Angular is not going to know about this one. So we're going to tell it to import, and then we're going to tell it something it doesn't know. Usually we would actually say like import like the module here. So we'll just say like home module, right? And then but we can't do that here because Angular does not, this application Angular does not know what this is. So we're going to import VII module dash module. You could also say VII component because now Angular, as of Angular 10, you can now import components from lazy load components. But we're going to stick with the module today. And now we've got this VII module that we're going to then do something because this import is a promise. So we tell the promise that after it's loaded from the remote, we're going to then load a certain module. So I'm going to take this out because this is not the app we're looking. This is not the module we're looking for. Well, you'll notice that there's some red squigglies here. So why is that? The reason why is because we have not actually Angular doesn't know what this module is. So we're going to need to go to the root source folder and add a new file. We're just going to call this decl or declaration.de.ts. This is like a magical title that gives Angular the knowledge of what this thing is. So I'm going to paste this in. We got declare module 7 dash module. And now when we go back, it magically knows that this thing is a thing. It doesn't know anything about that thing because it's pulling it from another location. It's not coming in through an import or anything. It's actually like, it's not coming in through like a standard import where you pull the actual module in. It's pulling the actual file, JavaScript file. So let's see here. The next thing we need to do, once we've got that done, is we're going to go in that Webpack config because we can't do anything without the Webpack config being configured. I showed you there were a couple places that were commented out, and that's what we're going to work with here. So the first thing we're going to do is this is a host. So this is not a remote. This is not the thing that's sitting out in the on the wire waiting to share. This is the thing that's going to receive and is hosting the files. So for hosts, we're going to cut all this stuff out because we don't need it, and we're going to uncomment this code. So what we're doing here is we're basically telling it, I need to load a remote. It's going to give you a default name, so Microfrontend 1, just kind of to give you an idea of what it is. We're going to call it VII because we're aligning these with what they are, Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8, so on and so forth. So change it to VII at, and then here's the URL. HTTP localhost, and we have it running on port 7000, where we will at least once we change the port. And then there's this magical file that we create. We're actually going to tell it to create that this is the file that it gets bundled up into. So remote entry.js. In addition to this, we can tell it to share certain files between the two. So I'm going to remove these. So we're basically telling it here to share Angular core, Angular common, and Angular router. And so what the singleton true means is that it's just similar to if you're using a shared property in the Angular component declaration. This is a similar thing, except we're just basically telling it a couple other things. So singleton true is going to let this thing live only once in memory. So whenever it needs to access something from Angular core, it's going to hit the thing inside of the browser, inside of the client's browser that is holding core. Core isn't going to be created twice. It's not going to live in both the shell and in the remote. It's actually going to live in the shell and get served to the remotes. So there's this code sharing back and forth, which this is the thing, the magic sauce that allows for that code reuse that we were talking about earlier, where you can actually go back and forth between those applications and they work seamlessly as one single page application, even though they're running on different essentially servers. Strict version, true. This is a way of keeping your dependencies locked together. So if this were false or if this were omitted, what would happen is, say you have Angular 12 on your remote, but you're still on Angular 11 on the host, the shell. Webpack is going to pick the highest version. So if there's some sort of reason that you have 11 still, say there's something new that's been added that breaks, it's going to break your application. So strict version true is a way of keeping, like allowing Webpack to basically short circuit this when it's building the bundles. And Webpack will say, it's not matching. And actually, this can get really annoying. I found this out the hard way. Literally, I was putting this together today, this code today, and they changed I think it was Angular material. I was sharing Angular material between the three, and they changed it from 11.2.4 to 11.2.5. And so it gave me that mismatched error. And so you can easily get into dependency hell with this, where you can just kind of be like, all right, well, which one's not loading which one's not working? And so there are some strategies for this. We're not going to get into this in this talk, for managing those dependencies and kind of having one single source of truth for those dependencies, so that all the applications kind of rely on the same code base. This is really, really important for enterprises in particular. So you want to, as an enterprise, you always want to make sure you're on the latest edition, the most secure, stable edition. And so you don't want to be having to update 100 different applications. Because remember, this is just an example, but this remotes file, if we were doing it this way and not dynamically, could have like, 700 lines in it, right? You could have tons and tons of micro applications running in this. You wouldn't do it this way if you were, because you do it dynamically, but I digress. You basically wouldn't want to have mismatches like that. So there are ways to get out of this. Like I said, we'll talk. If you can go, there's a Manfred. I think it's the third link down on my talk. We'll deal with that, but something to be aware of. So now that we've done the Webpack config for the shell, we need to edit the Webpack. We need to take care of this now on the remote. So I'm going to go into CD. I'm going to CD out of the shell and into the 7 folder. I clear this, kind of make sure we have a mental model kind of all cleared up. And I have, there we go. Let me clear this off, and I'm going to run that same command we did earlier, except this time I'm going to tell it to do it for 7. So I'm going to make it run on port 7000, and I'm going to change the name.
Froze again, Ben. So I'm going to
Wonderful.
grab this screen and then give it back to you.
Okay. All right, I'm going to stop the share.
All right. And then stop share.
You know what OS you're on Mac, Ben?
The newest one. It's
Big Sur.
Big Sur. Yeah.
So there's a known issue that I'm reading about freezing when you're sharing. It recommends. Are you wired? Are you wired connection?
I'm wired. Yeah. Yeah, I have a wired
connection. It actually recommends using wireless, like disconnecting.
Oh,
for
really?
Some reason.
Huh.
Some UDP protocol could be involved.
I'm on wireless now. I'm gonna change from 5G to a regular network. See if that fixes it. Can everyone still hear me?
Yep.
All right. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to run that npm command, or actually ng command, ng add the module federation package, and we're calling the project 7 this time, and we're saying port is going to be 7000. Because right now, if you were to open these up, they'd all be running on 4200, which is not something we want. So now when I go in here, I can see a couple of those files. Same files were created, same files, same things were edited. We're gonna gloss over that and kind of jump straight into the Webpack config. So the Webpack config is at the root of 7. There's the shell one. I need to go into 7. Here we go. Webpack config, and we got that same scaffolded out stuff. This time we're going to delete the hosts, and we're going to define this remote. So the first thing we do is we're going to say it's name 7, and then we're going to.
We just froze again.
Okay. Stop share. Start the share. Stop the share and share again.
We're good.
All right, cool. All right, so this is the remote. So this is 7. We've got the name. So this is going to be called 7, which aligns with what we called it in the shell. Remember, we called it 7 at, and then the URL. And then we're saying the file name. So we can name this anything we want, but we'd have to make it match in the shell. So we could call it like 7 remote or whatever. It's fine if you just name it the same thing. It's not going to hurt anything. And instead of component, we actually are going to expose the whole module. So we're going to say ./VII, which just basically is the whole folder. And then it's going to do this. I'm going to copy and paste this here. This is some magic I still don't quite understand, so I'll be completely honest with you. What it's doing is it's loading, it's exposing this module when you go to that VII link. How it's doing that, I'm not entirely sure. That's something to ask the people who made it, I guess. But you're basically saying, here's our root Angular VII folder source. And then inside of source, I have an app folder, I have a home folder, and then inside there I have an at home module. So my home module looks like this. It's got our home component, header component. That's that piece that says Final Fantasy VII at the top. It's got the character display component, which shows the information on the characters, the list of characters, and the cards that says, go to the characters. This basically lets you like do other things. Say you wanted to do something about like mini games or something, you could build a whole new section. So we are telling it to load that module. And again, same thing as before, we're sharing those common files, and we're telling it that it has to align to the same version number. So I think that's pretty much it. If we run yarn start on 7, and I'm going to open up another terminal here, and let's cd into the shell. You'll notice it's building separately here. Let's do yarn start again. Yarn start is basically just running a command that says ngserve. And this deprecation warning will show up anytime you're running this, just because I think this has to do with the fact that this is still kind of in beta. It's not fully baked. So they're still kind of working out some of the kinks, but you'll see 2 of them are compiled successfully and they're running. So if I hit this URL, 4200, and I hit, okay, so we got something wrong going with 7,000 here. Let's see what's going on. Okay. Looks like maybe we didn't pull in the right stuff. Anyway, you guys saw it running before. It works. I promise you. This is how you make this work for just manually exposing these. You have to go into here and the shell and tell it where to look for everything. So I go in and I say VII is found at VII at HTTP 7000 remote entry JS file. And then when I go there, I'm actually telling it I am VII, I'm sending this file, and I'm exposing this module here. So if we have other modules, we could also add another module here that we want to expose. Let's say we have like say we split out the characters module, right? We could do that. Yeah, just do it this way. So characters would be loaded separately, and then in here we would just do the same thing. We would, instead of 7, we would say characters. And then so like you could have multiple modules coming in from the external application for one application, and then then you have like another one like 8, and you have another definition. So you'd have like VIII, and then you have this. So VIII, and then let's say it's running on port 8000 instead of 7000. And then you're now pulling from technically 2 different remote locations, but you're pulling in 2 different modules from one of them and one from another. So this, you can see really quickly, this is very powerful. We can share code between the two of these 2, 3, 400 applications, require certain versions. It's very, very powerful. So that's it for running this as in a non-dynamic way. But as you can tell, this is going to be kind of a pain to set all these remotes every single time. So you're gonna eventually, say you're like Netflix and you have 2,000 front-end applications running, you're gonna have a file that looks like this. It's ridiculously long, and we don't want that. So what we can do is actually load these dynamically. So let me go ahead and check out the application. Must be in the wrong folder here. I'm gonna check out another my other branch. Start from the end here. Getting rid of everything and starting over here. I'm stashing everything, and I'm going to check out G-step-2. Some issues here, sorry. Visual Studio Code is acting up for me here. I apologize. My Git has disappeared. No, that's fine. Let's change this to the final step. So I'm going to go to it's basically trying to add the node modules folders. We don't want those. I'm just going to delete them. Okay, well, maybe I'll show this from YouTube from GitHub. So basically what we got for the steps for doing it dynamically. Keep in mind, there are some of these are still being ironed out, still worked out, and so things might change, but we do the same thing. We add the resolutions, Webpack 5 to the package JSON, set CLI to yarn if it's not, usually is. I mean, if we already did it once, we don't need to do it again. We're going to do the same thing where we add the port and the name of the shell to each application that we're doing. And then the difference here is that we are going to go into our main TS file and we're going to load them there. So you actually could actually have a service that would serve these up, and you would call into that service, and it would actually give you all the remotes. So you could have that service sitting in like a Next.js or even a .NET Core application up on a server somewhere, and say, I want to get all of these, all the micro applications that should be running on this page send them to me, and then you can dynamically insert them here using promises, and then just load them like that. So that's why I say dynamic, because like in this example, we're actually defining them just like we were before, but we're using this thing that the Module Federation plugin application gives us called load remote entry. So load remote entry will actually do that. It makes it'll make that HTTP call out and do all the setup similar to what we were doing before. The difference is now when we add our routes, we're gonna do it a little bit differently. So because Angular isn't going to know about what those things are because we haven't told it anywhere, its main TS is actually sitting outside of the Angular zone. We're going to have to tell it to load the children in a little bit different way than we normally would for a lazy loaded component. So we would go in here, and in the routes, we'd add our remote name. So just like we did before, 7, and then exposing the module. So we're just going to .-module. That's basically just telling the Webpack module federation to use modules instead of components. And then we're telling it which modules to load. So we're going to tell it to load the home module whenever we go to the path for VII. Then in the Webpack config, it's a lot more simple. So we don't have to put any of those remotes in here. We don't have to list them out, have them, 100 of different remotes. We just have an open and close brackets. We still have the sharing because this is a separate function of Webpack module federation, and we can share those separately correctly with one another. So just a couple notes for this. We want to define a shared package as a singleton. It'll make it only exist in memory one time. We talk about that. This is what the strict version does. And then over here, you're going to keep the shell the actual application definitions the exact same way they were before. So I put on 2 separate files for you to follow along in case you wanted to do one dynamically and one is dynamic, whichever you chose. You give a small application, non-dynamic works just fine if you only have a couple apps that need to talk to each other. But if you have a lot of applications that you need to string together, you can do that. Another cool thing I didn't talk about here in this talk, but is definitely a functionality that is doable. You can share, like, say you have a couple React applications and you have a couple Angular applications, some Vue applications, even vanilla JS applications, and you want to share all that code between them. Say you want to be able to show a module that's coming from, or a component that's coming from React in your Angular application. Module Federation lets you do that, which is huge. We'd never been able to do that before. So with the exception of things like Vue, where you can actually, Vue is so small that you can kind of build these micro front ends without Webpack. But it does get cumbersome because you end up having a lot of JS script tags on your HTML page. So that's pretty much Angular module federation in a nutshell. I apologize profusely for all of the tech issues we were having here. But does anyone have any questions about that stuff?
We had a dual presentation on module federation and Zoom troubleshooting. So
yeah.
bonus content. Yeah, does anyone have any questions from that? Feel free to unmute and ask, or just drop them in the chat.
Yeah, I had a question. One of them you just answered. So yeah, what you were just saying, that kind of gives the sort of like polyglot benefit that microservices give. Mm-hmm. The sort of second question that I had to that was, so let's say you had the situation that you were talking about where some of your micro front ends are React and some are Angular or vanilla JavaScript or whatever. Can you share, like, let's say you had 2 or 3 that were React and 2 or 3 that were vanilla JavaScript. Can the React ones share the React dependencies? Can you like nest the shared stuff like that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you can. You would kind of have it all in one file, one Webpack config. You'd have to choose which you wanted to use as your shell. So you'd have to have it either running in Angular or in React or just a vanilla JS Webpack config file. But you could say, some of the file in that shared app, the shared list, you would just put React, even though you were also sharing Angular common, Angular router, you just said then the next one down would be React router, React, all those things. And then you could do the same thing with those React packages that you can with the Angular packages. You can tell it, use a singleton, so it only instantiates it once and then from the shell, and it sends it out as it's, contacting those, or you can have the actual micro front ends load those separately. So say you have one React application, it may not make sense to have the shell load React, even though, because that person may not actually end up on that page, right? You want them to load React only when they actually get to, say you have like a flight, like an airline website, and you have a checkout page that's in React, but the rest of it's in Angular. You can have that as not a singleton and not worrying about the version, and it would just load it in the micro front end when it pulls that package out. So
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got one for you, Ben.
Uh-oh.
It's a softball. For figuring out where to kind of draw the lines, like that's always a challenge with microservices also in the back end. So in the front end, have they established any good conventions of, like, you can get carried away, every component is its own front end microservice, or is there good standards that you can follow when you're architecting it?
So I think the same principle that applies to microservices applies to micro front ends. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. You can get into the exact same problem with microservices that you were trying to get away from with a monolithic architecture by introducing too many applications. Because before, you were looking through one application trying to find one line of code that was huge. Now you're looking through a million applications because each component is its own application, and it becomes, it spirals out of control pretty quickly. So yeah, I think there's principles in place. I would definitely recommend looking at the Manfred's article. There's fantastic stuff in there. He goes everything from like just straight module federation with a vanilla JavaScript for a couple different apps, all the way out to dynamically loading everything using React, Angular, Vue, everything, and managing all those dependencies in a way that's not going to break the bank. So I definitely recommend reading that last article. That's going to talk about those. But as for like, is there a standard? I mean, Webpack 5 is brand new. And module federation is brand new. So feel free to write the standard. Please tell us when you find out, because but I think it really comes down to common sense. Like, is this something I should be doing? Is the question we should be asking ourselves right alongside of, can I do this? Because it may not make sense. Anyone else?
Question. Yeah, I have a question kind of related to kind of security. It looked like you could just kind of put any other remote module in there. What about authorization and things like that?
Yeah. So authorization is something you can. It gets tricky when you're talking about cross origin, right? So you have some certain ports. I mean, if you have different servers, even you can load that way. I think that's where safe types comes in with Chrome and with Edge. They allow you. I have to look a little bit more into it, but I know that's something that Angular team's working on for safe typing. That allows you to use things like authentication in a safe way that people can't just like share them across domains easily and peer into them. But yeah, it's a really good question. I'll have to look into that. But I think one of the things that I didn't get to actually further along in the tutorial from Manfred is authentication. And there are some examples of using auth and authorization packages and stuff like that, sharing those across the domains. So yeah, it's a good question. I'll have to look into that one more. Got any more questions?
Yeah, anybody else?
A couple things in the chat here. Let me take a look. Oh, it's just Vince telling me what's wrong with my computer. It's not a Windows computer.
We had group troubleshooting going on.
That's right.
Still think it's due to that fancy Mac, but I don't know
Probably
exactly
is.
what.
It probably
Well,
is. I haven't nothing but problems with this Mac since I upgraded it. So
Once you switch to Wi-Fi, it froze like very quickly, and then after that we were good. So
Oh,
I'm
cool.
running with that fix if I run into that again.
Yeah. So cool.
All right, cool. Well, last chance for questions. No pressure. But if no one has anything else, Ben, I just wanted to thank you again for presenting tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks for putting up with the tech issues. Appreciate it.
It's all good, man. Yeah,
thanks.
we will meet again next month, third Thursday, whichever one that is. I should be announcing the presentation tomorrow or sometime over the weekend. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. And thank you for attending, everyone. I hope to see you again sometime in the future.
Hey Ben, good job, man. Like
Oh, thanks.
running into those issues like that during this totally sucked. So